At this point, we all know how it goes. The Rangers are engaging with the Monster of the Week in a street-level fight. After the Rangers successfully turn the monster into a fireworks display, the monster gets a second wind by some way, shape, or form, and sizes itself into kaiju-like proportions, bringing the threat to an entirely new level. This is when our Rangers fight fire with fire by calling upon their machines and, eventually, combining to create their Team Robot, generally referred to as giant robos in Sentai, but officially classified as Megazords on the Power Rangers side. Giant combining robots are incredibly exciting because it allows the opportunity to present the Rangers' powers and abilities in an entirely new scale and medium. These robots showcase creative designs as well as thoughtful engineering behind their logical yet clever combinations and transformations. Over the years, Sentai has really been pushing the boundaries of innovation for their combining robots. I've always loved Robos and Megazords, so in this video, I want to talk about what I think goes into making a great team robot. Alright, as usual, here's a quick disclaimer before we start off. In this deep dive, I'm going to be digging into different aspects of the combining robot mechanics across Sentai. To do this, I'll be taking into consideration both the on-screen and toy versions of these robos. At the end of the day, these robots, and honestly everything else about the franchise, are intended to be made into toys. The integration of functionality and application of the robos into real-life, manageable objects deeply influences their overall designs and concepts, sometimes for the better and sometimes not so much. As a Toku, Mecha, and Transformers fan, I have a few key points in my mind that measure just how well done a Sentai Robo is. So with that, I'll be sharing those points with you as well as some examples of which Robos in Sentai history stand out to me the most. But anyways, let's gattai and get to it. Giant combining robots are a staple in Sentai, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But while Robos have a colorful history across the franchise, not all of them are made equal. When I look at a Sentai Robo, I'm looking for a few things. The first one is composition. There are several themes that are showcased through Super Sentai. Yes, good triumphs over evil, and yes, fighting is always done better in spandex and or lycra. Those are both very great themes. But one obvious one is the value of teamwork. Sentai differentiates itself from other superhero mediums because they operate as a team. Yes, you have teams like the Avengers or the Justice League, but those teams are made up of heroes of their own backstories and concepts, and don't necessarily share a direct connection with each other. Not saying that our Rangers don't have interesting and definitive backgrounds themselves, but they are connected with one another via concept, design, and theme. So, naturally, their combining robot is not only an extension of their power, but also of their dynamic as a team. When I say composition with regards to Sentai Robos, I'm really looking at the distribution and proportionality of all the Rangers across this combined form. Ideally, each Ranger has a pretty equal role in the robot, since, theoretically, each Ranger is an equal contributor to the team, right? This is a pretty generic and baseline composition style for the combining robot, usually with each Ranger acting as one limb each. I say generic, not in a bad way. This is the blueprint for the combining robot philosophy, and I think when a robot does this well, it appropriately highlights each Ranger's impact and importance. Over the years, this hasn't always been the case though. Understandably, future iterations of the combining robot can't rely on the same blueprint year after year, so they're going to need to take some creative liberties. One such liberty may involve one Ranger's machine really overshadowing the rest. I see this happen a lot with red machines, and it's been a bit of a trend that red is quite large and the rest of the Rangers act as limb extensions for the combined form. Yeah, I get that Red is the leader, and it probably makes sense that he has the biggest share, but it still feels like a bit of a disservice to the team as a whole. There are a lot of examples of red supremacy in combiners, like Abareno, Kishiryuo, Kyureno, and more. But for this specific example, I'd like to bring up Kira Major's combining robo, Kiramajin. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like the Machins. I think they're fun and flashy additions to the Sentai combining robo family. My main gripe comes with their combined Kiramajin form. Machin Fire, as the biggest one of them all, understandably takes up most of the form, with Shovelo as the left arm, Helico as a chest piece, and Mach as the face and shoulder. And where does Jetter fit into this? Ah yes, he's the sword. Wait, what? Yeah, he's the sword of Kiramajin. Granted, in the Sky Mage form, he does a lot more, but in the combined form with all 5 Rangers, his role is the weapon that could easily be dropped or done without. And yes, I get that the sword concept is thematic for Kirame Blue, but you couldn't have made Jetter the arm and made the sword out of Helico's helicopter blades. It still would rely on Blue's handling of the blade, as he is an actual arm controlling the sword rather than just being the sword itself. In my opinion, this is an example of uneven distribution, not necessarily just by looks, but also by function. I do think that there are ways a robo can have uneven distribution and have it not feel off-putting. Take, for this example, the Royal Robo Kingohger. Kingohger is pretty widely recognized as a groundbreaking robo with its sleeker proportions making its toy form much more posable and faithful to its on-screen version. The way this is done is by having God Kuwagata act as like 80% of the robo, and the other Shoe Gods as extensions of Kingohger. Now, I get how you may think this contradicts my opinion on the matter, but I think Kingohger actually takes the unevenness and balances it well. God Hachi and God Kamakiri are the legs, sure, there's nothing groundbreaking there. The inclusion of God Ant, God Kumo, and God Tento is kind of a cheat because it sort of distracts you from the fact that God Kuwagata is pretty much everything, but what I think it does well is with the role of God Tonbo and God Papillon. God Tonbo serves as a sword, very similar to Machinjetter, but also as the very large wings of Kingohger, and God Papillon lends its wings to the hilt of the sword as well as the rest of its body to Kingohger's daunting face. Kingohger centers itself around the red machine, but also distributes the roles of the others well enough for there still to be a sense of well-balanced unity, both visually and thematically. The next point I want to bring up is Ingenuity. When you have at least 5 machines you need to combine into one humanoid-ish robot, probably the first thing you'll think about doing is just slapping each one on as a body part and calling it a day. In some more than others, Sentai Robos require the individual pieces to alter themselves significantly in order to accommodate the combination. This is always a breath of fresh air because I, personally, view combining Robos with the same lens that I view Transformers. If at an initial glance I can't immediately tell how something is meant to transform, I consider it to be a pretty good design. Now, I'm not going to defend every complicated transformation. If you've watched any video by Jobby the Hong, you know that complicated doesn't always mean good. However, there's a balance that needs to be achieved between stupid simple and needlessly complex. Granted, Sentai Robos can't necessarily be treated the same as Transformers because their priorities are a little bit different. There still has to be a fun, thoughtful, yet logical way that these machines combine into this robo. An example for this, while it's not a perfect example, is Kakuranger's Dai Shogun. Here's a robo where you can pretty clearly tell all the individual parts of it. Something I always loved about Dai Shogun is the torso and the legs. Like, at an initial glance, how did the bear Kumar compress itself to just be the torso? And how did the frog Gamera become those legs? Of course, the bear is engineered to compress quite seamlessly, and the frog takes advantage of its own concept and design to possess large enough legs on its own. Even though you can definitely figure it out eventually, it still starts off as a fun little mind game at least. I did mention that this isn't really a perfect example because it does something well and something not so well, and that's mainly because of the hands. Red's Sauruder and Blue's Logan become the arms through a decent transformation on their own, but then their heads end up as the extremities. Instead of transforming themselves into hands, they have to borrow parts stored on Kumar in order to cover their heads and turn into fists. In my opinion, this is a bit of a missed opportunity in terms of engineering and ingenuity, because the need to rely on those extra pieces does feel a bit parsed for me. But other than that, there are definitely some good takeaways from Dai Shogun to emphasize this point. In cases like this, I usually give robos a pass if the limbs of the robo have some slight transformation involved. Where things really start to get crazy is when the overall combination has a more complex process. I have an example for this, and in my opinion, it is the pinnacle of Sentai Robo ingenuity, but I'm gonna save that one for later. But moving on, the last point I'd like to bring up is translatability. Like I said, most everything about Super Sentai is intended to be made and sold as toys. There's really a lot of truth when people joke about Sentai or Rider being weekly 30-minute toy commercials. When establishing the teams combining robos, the designers have to think about how to make this actually functional as a toy. This point really has a presence in the previous 2 points as well. When considering the composition and the makeup of the robo, can this structure be supported in toy form? When considering the transformation of the robo, is it clever and fun enough to be sold for its ingenuity and play value? And ultimately, it comes down to replication. I think a huge factor into getting a viewer, especially a child, connected with the show is to be able to do what is happening in the show in real time. When they watch the Rangers change and they bring out their changers to do the exact same thing, there's an undeniable bond being made there in the form of a relatable experience and imagination. In that same vein, when the team is combining their machines, if the audience is able to do that alongside the show, it adds so much to the impact of the robo's play value and image. Honestly, most Sentai Robos accomplish this well. They're very faithful to what's shown on screen, from the individual transformations to the overall combinations. Heck, there are times when they hit it way out of the park by adding in features that allow you to replicate their special moves, like Abureno's spinning tail gimmick or Gekitoja's waist spinning gimmick. The one that really dropped the ball on this is, and I hate to say it, Zyuohger's Zyuo King. Jewel King is an interesting robo to say the least. GREAT as a series had a heavy emphasis on the cube aesthetic, and as such, the machines they commanded had this aesthetic as well. In order to combine their machines into Jewel King, Jewel Eagle, Shark, and Lion stack on top of each other, and when the big King sword is inserted down the center, Jewel King's arms pop out of Eagle and the transformation is complete. A couple things. I totally get why they did this. The cube stacking gimmick is really cute and quite thematic. However, this concept in itself robs Jewel King of so much. As a combined robo, Jewel King has close to no posability. The main posability it has is in its arms, which are these tiny little limbs that pop out to hold onto a very tiny sword. While that is fun that the King Sword gimmick pops those out, was it really that important enough to reduce Jewel King's arms to little tiny nubs? And then there's the legs. Jewel King, in the show, has a very normal pair of legs, right? DX Jewel King, however, decided to be very, air quotes, clever, and instead of having actual legs, has a black triangular-ish shape run down from Jewel Shark through Jewel Lion to simulate the illusion of separation. Now, this just feels dishonest. While it's not done a whole lot, it is a bit of a pet peeve of mine when a giant robo or anything uses fake negative space to give off the intended effect through illusion. I feel like there must have been an easier way. The King Sword gimmick really only affects Jewel Eagle, so why couldn't they have the legs just separate a bit like Gohanger's Engino and call it a day? Granted, with combining robos now, there seems to be a bit more effort into emphasizing accurate proportions and posability of the robos, but GREAT wasn't that long ago. By throwing all its chips into honoring the show's concept, Jewel King created a huge discrepancy between the on-screen robo and the toy robo, sacrificing the on-screen and audience connection that makes it so impactful. So what am I trying to say here? A good combining robo has to represent each ranger well, it has to be cleverly engineered, and it has to have consistent faithfulness from its on-screen model to its toy counterpart. These are the points that a robo needs to clear for it to signal to me that it's a well thought out concept and design. That being said, here are my top 5 robos that I think accomplish some or all of these very, very well. First, there's Shinkeno, or the Samurai Megazord, which is a great example of balance and versatility, with the origamis possessing their alternate emblem forms while still being capable of a relatively complex transformation. Next up is Don Oni Taijin, which is no stranger to my mentions because it very effectively embodies the sharp and edgy style of Don Brothers with some unique Robotaros and an incredibly daunting combined mode. After this is Time Robo, or the Time Force Megazord, which is such an eclectic robo, being able to have a smooth and sleek combined jet mode, as well as 2 conceptually contrasting robot forms, all engineered into one. High up in my ranking is Gao King, or the Wild Force Megazord, which is my go-to when I think they just don't make robos like they used to, because of its amazing individual animals and a powerful combined mode that screams classic Sentai robo energy to the fullest. And my top robo, which was the example I was saving from earlier, is Magi King, or the Mystic Force Megazord. This robo is my absolute favorite because of its ability to convey its concept through its sharp colors and design, its amazing transformation into the dragon mode, and the overall mysticism and wonder it exudes through its incredible engineering and stylization. Giant robos and megazords really provide a new perspective on the battle between good and evil. Not only do they provide something new and cool in the form of huge robots and machines, but they represent a visualization of unity and teamwork, which is in the very essence and spirit of Super Sentai. Robos will always be a hallmark of this franchise, and I can't wait to see how Sentai continues to evolve this concept in ways that are larger than life. Now, we've talked a lot about robos and megazords today, so which ones are your favorite? And what are your favorite aspects about those robos? Let me know. Thanks again for joining me in this mildly deep dive into the Sentai Robo scene. I'll be back with some more fun Toku topics to Toku talk about. See you next time.